Hi, this is Tom Stone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this fifth class on the new version of the Freedom Practice 2022. And in this class, we're going to be talking about muscle testing and how to make it reliable. Now, the last class was learning the muscle testing, and this class is about taking a look at finding any of the really significant barriers that would get in the way of the muscle testing becoming like a really reliable and a really valuable tool. And the reason for this is that we have just one rule in Inner Greatness Optimizing, and that is muscle test everything. And it's an extremely good rule because what the muscle testing does, as you know, if you watched the previous class, it helps you to access the experiential wisdom of the body. And what experiential wisdom means is that you can talk all day about the taste of a strawberry, but if you've never taken a bite of one, you don't know what it really tastes like. Talking about it doesn't give you the taste. What's important is to actually have the experience of something, and it's through the experience of the body and the senses that we can truly know what something is like as an experience. So the way to get the taste of a strawberry is to eat one, take a bite. That's why the muscle testing is so valuable, because it's a way of being able to compare that experiential wisdom we can get from the body with what we get from the mind, our thinking, our intellectual ideas about things. So this is a way of bringing about a kind of congruence between body and mind, or testing to see if there is already congruence or if there's some kind of discrepancy, some mismatch between what we experienced and what we think we know. So this turns out to be a central and probably one of the most important skills to have if you're doing Inner Greatness Optimizing or our sort of condensed training in the basics of it, which is this Freedom Practice course. So I have a PowerPoint for this, and this is a very interesting class because it's going to be mostly about experiencing understanding and experiencing what the barriers are to having the muscle testing be reliable, and then actually going through the process of using what we've already learned with the peer awareness techniques. And of course, for this, I'll be doing the muscle testing, but we're going to find and remove the principal barriers to having the muscle testing be reliable, which are also the principal barriers to you being able to trust yourself. This has a much broader impact and value to your life than just getting the muscle testing reliable. It kind of gets your life reliable. So I think you'll enjoy it. Let's take a look at the PPT. Freedom Practice Training Lesson 5, Making Muscle Testing Reliable. So the overview of this lesson is that in order to get good at muscle testing, for getting the most out of doing the freedom practice, one of the primary essential skills that you need is the ability to make the distinctions between intuitive thoughts and ego and emotionally pain-based thoughts. Most people don't even know this distinction, and even fewer have any clarity about it. What's needed is to find and resolve the inner barriers that cause this distinction to not be clear. And that's what this lesson is all about. Getting really good at muscle testing, making muscle testing reliable. And the three central things we're going to do today is to resolve the fear of punishment, to resolve the discomfort and fear of uncertainty, and to resolve the fear of emotional overwhelm. These are the three main trauma/fear combinations that cause people to not trust themselves and therefore not to trust their intuition. And that's essential to be able to do in order to have muscle testing be reliable. So we'll be using Locate to get access to the energy of these barriers, and the impact that using muscle testing has on your life is also something we'll cover. Getting really good at muscle testing. So we start by making the decision that you are very good at muscle testing, and you remove any barriers to that being so for you. And then you're going to practice this every day. You get good at formulating intention statements. You do a lot of cross-testing, and you allow the shift to take place from relying on your thinking to trusting your intuitive knowing. This is a wonderful, wonderful development. Kind of adds a whole new dimension to one's life. So making muscle testing reliable. To have muscle testing work reliably, you have to be able to trust yourself. The main barrier to trusting yourself is the fear of punishment. You go deep into pure awareness and you challenge the story to see whether it's really relevant to you at all in that moment. It's a good investment of your life energy to be creating this story and reaction. You challenge that, you find out it's not a good idea. Is it helping you to have the life that you want in any particular way? And again, the answer to all three of these questions will be no. And then, do you feel more a choice about whether you continue creating this story or not? And the answer to that is yes, because what you've done is you've made something that's been an old, unconscious, inadvertent, bad habit, we could say. You've made conscious what it is you're doing rather than just continuing to do it by the deep conditioning that you've received. So you unplugged from the story, and everything, the story and the energy, collapse back into nothingness, the very nothingness out of which you created them in the first place. So when you no longer have the fear of punishment and or confrontation, the next step is to be comfortable with uncertainty. When you have an intuition and you feel compelled to act on it, there's likely to be uncertainty and there's likely to be costly mistakes. So you may fear that something unexpected negative might happen. And the fear of uncertainty causes us to create expectations in order to try to know what's going to happen. Then we can't tell the difference between our expectations and our intuition. Creating expectations is a total waste of life energy. So why is it that we do that? Well, typically we grow up in a universe where people are just doing this. We kind of learn to do it almost by osmosis. We're just around it a lot, and it just seems like that's what you do. Basically, the universe is not coercible. We can't tell it what to do and have it just respond to that, regardless of what these various personal development movies like The Secret and similar things, regardless of what they say, it doesn't work. You can't convince it to make life show up according to your ego's idea of how it should be. The idea proposed by so many of the personal development teachings is this: I create my reality. It's coming from identification with the ego. We're deeply conditioned to believe that we are the authors of our actions, that we are the doer. However, it's the laws of nature that do all the doing of everything. They act through us. We don't command them. This is not a popular notion, as everyone is so deeply conditioned to believe that they are their ego, that they are an isolated individual. The reality is that you are the limitlessness of pure awareness, and it is this universality of what you really are that creates everything. Therefore, the idea that I create my reality is only true if the sense of who and what you are is coming from being really grounded in the state of pure awareness. Then you're not concerned about who's creating your reality. The distinction between being the doer and being an expression of pure awareness that the laws of nature act through is something that you can only truly understand when you shift to experiencing this as your reality. Now, there are two levels to this process. One is learning how to resolve the energy fields of expectations, and the other is learning how to resolve the underlying fear and discomfort with uncertainty that is at the basis of the habit of creating expectations in the first place. So we'll be doing both. You've already learned how to resolve reactions to unmet expectations by using the out technique to resolve the engulfing emotional energy fields. After doing a lot of these, you start to become aware when you're about to create a new expectation, and you realize that it's just going to create another reaction that you'll have to resolve later. you start to not create expectations anymore. You begin to live in the wonder of uncertainty instead of the terror of uncertainty. To resolve the traumas at the basis of the fears of uncertainty, using the pure awareness techniques, simply use the locate technique to get access to the energy of the trauma, and then use the appropriate technique, either or both, to resolve the energy. Remember that locate is an iterative process. So go back into the background of quietness after each energy is resolved and tell the body again to show you if there's anything else. Make sure to do a thorough job of locating, accessing, and resolving all of the energy. As with something like this, you may very well have some backup copies, we call them. That means the same energy stored in different locations. The key component for debugging the discomfort with uncertainty is resolving our deeply ingrained habit of needing to know things with our intellect. Uncertainty feels uncomfortable because we're highly conditioned to think that we get certainty through intellectually understanding things. We don't actually know things with our intellect. Knowing occurs through direct experience. We get a sense of certainty when there is congruence between what we experience and what we intellectually understand. This actually encourages us to feel that we need to know things with our intellect. The intellectual understanding is so closely linked to the direct experience that it feels as if we know things with the intellect. The gross physical senses produce experiences that seem very real. This realness is caused by proximity with the things that are being sensed, proximity in time and space. The sense of certainty is produced by the congruence between the direct experience and the intellect being able to put a description or order to the experience right away. Then it seems real. Then it seems reliable. This is a kind of certainty about that feels comfortable. What we need to resolve is the feeling of the need to always be able to understand things with intellect. So we use locate to access that energy, and typically it's an in-technique energy, and there'll be a shift from needing to understand with intellect to being able to trust that you simply know using what are called your subtle senses. Is an intention a lie? When you intend something, it will usually be a new way of being that you want to manifest in your life. You're encouraged to formulate the statement of your intention in positive terms as if it already exists. Now, when learning this, some people say, but it isn't what I am experiencing yet, so it seems like I am lying. How can I be getting a strong muscle test when I'm not living the reality of that situation yet? So the muscle test is to determine if your inner human software is programmed so that you can indeed step into the reality of your intention. That might happen automatically, or it may take a while. So there may be something you even need to do in order to step into the reality of your fully living from your intention. So there may be a difference between being switched on for your intention and already fully living it. It's a bit like learning to use newly installed software on your computer. You won't use every feature of it the first time you use it. It's valuable to recognize this distinction and be okay with the process of living into the full expression of your intention. So, muscle testing, solidifying your skill. So, what conflicts and problems are you aware of in your life? What I'd like you to do is to take a few moments and make a list of them. Let's stop the screen share for a moment. Go ahead and actually make a list, either on your computer or just by hand. And, 3 or 4 of them will be sufficient. These are things that you'd like to have be better in your life. These are places where you may have some inner conflicts.
So while you were talking, I began to feel through some energy that came up when you were talking about the fear of punishment.
Yeah.
I'm still doing that. So you recommend finishing it or making the list and then doing it later?
You can go ahead and finish it. It's okay.
Yeah.
You can make your list while we're working with someone else with their list.
Oh, yeah, sure.
It's important to understand this simple principle that there are three aspects to every experiencer. And that's you have yourself as the experiencer, you have something that you're experiencing, which is the object of experience, and you have the process of experiencing it. So we could say there's a knower, that's you. There's the known, that's the thing that you're knowing something about. And there's the process of knowing it, the connection between the two. So this gives us some insight into the origin of problems. Having a false sense of being the knower, which means being identified with things that are not really what you are. You sometimes need something external, and you're identified with external things we feel we have to have in order to feel whole and complete. So it's interesting that comes from when we're in the womb, we're getting all of our needs met automatically. But when we come out and the umbilical cord is cut, then we have needs that are not met immediately. There's a gap between the need and the need being met. And so when the gap becomes too much, really significant gap, then we start to have this feeling that something's missing. It feels like the part of us that meets our needs isn't there. After all, we can't even turn ourselves over in our crib, and we're dependent on someone else for everything. The fear of being overwhelmed is when we're identified with a child's limited ability to experience emotional competence, experience their emotions, then we develop the fear of being overwhelmed. And so this creates the origin of problems. We feel separate from that thing that we feel we need in order to have a sense of feeling whole and complete. So most people live their lives as the product of their conditioning, and they live inside an illusory, unreal world. Now, what happens is when we have an intention, the intention would be the energy of the green line on this chart. And that would be the energy and the pattern of its energy of the optimal state of the waveform that is the intention. Now, the red line would be the energy of any kind of conditioned responses, which would mean the energy of any in or out technique energies that are at the basis of this conflict. And the result of the interaction between the intention and that which is counter to the intention, which is the conditioning, produces the blue line, which is a much, much weakened expression of the intention, so much so it's not likely to actually manifest in one's life. So what we're doing with our work with freedom practice is we're identifying the energy patterns that create the red line and eliminating them by using the in and out technique to resolve those energies. That frees us up to then have the green line become optimal, because the only thing in its way is the conditioned response energies that are sabotaging it. So this is the physics of self-sabotage. How to use freedom practice on yourself. With traditional coaching or therapy, it's not so easy to practice it on yourself. With the freedom practice, you can because of the use of self-muscle testing. The simple systematic nature of freedom practice is also a very valuable part of what makes it easy to work on yourself. It's important to do this frequently. Use it anytime you're having a problem. Use it when you're feeling upset with a situation or with someone else. Your higher self, we could call it, organizes the circumstances to help you in your evolution. And you can just sort of see the world as a mirror. You take advantage of every situation for your own growth. And this makes the process of living wholeness something practical. These insights provide clear perceptions and explanations of the true nature of people's conditioning and how to be free of these influences. It allows people to free themselves from illusions, limitations, problems, and suffering. It's a simple, clear, and deeply insightful process, and it's quick and effective. It makes living wholeness practical, It washes away the deepest causes of problems. It rapidly transforms people's lives. It frees people to be true to themselves and to live and express their unique greatness. It has high efficacy and is reliable. Basically, it works. So what's it like to optimize your inner greatness? Well, you stop having doubts. You stop having negative thoughts. You stop being judgmental of yourself and others. You stop being the victim of your emotions, and you consistently trust and act on your intuition. You become free of the limitations of the past and future, and you become totally present, living fully in the moment. You have greater harmony and fulfillment in your relationships. There's more. You have greatly increased capacity to feel anything and everything. You have the full support of all the laws of nature, and you spontaneously act in alignment with nature. You become the agent of nature. You live life in the zone as a kind of frictionless flow. You experience complete self-sufficiency and independence. You feel a profound sense of freedom and inner peace. Freedom from inappropriate fears. The energy of fear being created in our bodies is a natural function that gives us important information and motivates us to take action when there's real danger. However, in modern life, we tend to create fear in our bodies due to conditioned responses that no longer represent real danger. Our interpretation of danger is often still dominated by a child's perspective. The energy of trauma is held in our bodies because we don't know how to complete the experience of the energy that the body is producing. Skillfully resolving our traumas results in a life of freedom, happiness, and self-expression. Conscious and unconscious conflicts. The conditioning at the basis of most inner conflicts is unconscious. Sometimes we know what our inner conflicts are. More commonly, it seems that there is some kind of invisible forces keeping us from having what we want. And this is because inner conflicts are typically coming from a persistent, unresolved feeling that is grounded in our pre-verbal conditioning. In both cases, the inner conflicts persist, we continue to suffer, and usually without knowing why. In integrating the freedom practice into your work and your life, there's a tendency to tolerate suffering. Most people have that. Notice when you're upset or not feeling good. Test if what you're experiencing could be changed for the better with freedom practice. If yes, then do the freedom practice right away. You're very likely to get a good breakthrough. There's something called the tragedy of knowledge, and I have a whole lecture on that you can find on the webpage of extra webinars or videos regarding the Extraordinary Coach Training, assuming you're in that program. And the tragedy of knowledge is the fate of all the great traditions of knowledge. What happens is that some wise, very wise person, teacher, teaches from their level of consciousness, and their student who's not at that level of consciousness, or they wouldn't be there studying with them, they hear what's said or what's read, and they often misinterpret it because they're not at the same level of consciousness as the teacher. So, for example, in the Vedic literature, it says, in pure awareness, there are no desires. Well, the student reading that, instead of just taking it as a description of one of the attributes of being in the state of pure awareness, interprets it as, oh, I got to get rid of my desires. So they become a recluse, they renounce everything, they live in a cave with their loincloth and Bhagavad Gita or whatever, and they think that they're pursuing gaining pure awareness through not having desires. But this isn't what was said. What was said was, in pure awareness, there are no desires. It's not a method of getting to pure awareness. So this kind of misinterpretation happens in virtually every tradition of knowledge. And this is why, in many cases, the modern religions of our day have degraded into just codes of behavior. Do this, don't do that. There's not a tremendous amount of significance to the true spiritual basis that was there, perhaps, at the beginning of that tradition. Must have been there or wouldn't have lasted very long. But it's gradually degraded as time has gone along. A game that children play at birthday parties or other kinds of gatherings called the telephone game. And what happens is the birthday boy or girl starts usually and whispers something to the kid next to them, who then whispers it to the next kid, and the next whispers to the next kid, and it goes around the table. And when it gets back to the original person, and the last person whispers it back to the person who started the whole thing, it's very often completely different than what was said in the beginning. And so this is a kind of example of the simple phenomena of the tragedy of knowledge. When there's a difference between the awareness of the teacher and the student, it'll be oftentimes the student will be like one of those kids in the birthday party, and they'll get it wrong. And then they'll pass it on to the next person who also gets it even more wrong. And the whole knowledge degrades into a shadow of its former self. What's needed is to have whoever is doing teaching of any kind of true spiritual knowledge, they have to be coming from pure awareness. And when they are, it'll be right, allowing the knowledge of pure awareness to stay both pure and to adapt to the changing times, that combination. And that's what keeps the essence and the purity of some good knowledge available for a long time. And so I'm mentioning this because the creating of the freedom practice was actually an insight that I had as a way to counter this influence of the tragedy of knowledge for this work, for integrative optimizing, freedom practice, pure awareness techniques. These things can all last a long time if the people who are teaching them or coaching with them or mentoring with them, if those people are actually functioning from a very fully integrated state of pure awareness. So it's basically you have a teacher, you have some knowledge. What we want to do is bring the knowledge of the student up to at least the level of the teacher or even more. And this will help to ensure this process of keeping the knowledge pure and also allowing it to adapt to changing times, because the person is just basically speaking from pure awareness. So experience and questions. Right. So what we want to do now, how are you doing, Jazz? Did you finish that one?
I thought it was finished, and then I felt a sort of strange emptiness. So it seems there's this gatekeeper, and I'm trying to feel it now, but I can't perfectly concentrate, but I'm trying.
Sure. To listen and concentrate both at the same time is a little tricky. This emptiness that you felt, there are sort of two kinds of emptiness. There's an emptiness that is kind of like a black hole, sort of like a void. And there's actually a kind of energy to that seemingly empty situation. And that's quite a different feeling than the feeling of pure awareness. And I'm just bringing it up to check with you to see, because sometimes the emptiness is just being in pure awareness, there's nothing there.
It does feel unnatural to me, though.
Unnatural, yeah. If it feels unnatural, then it's the former, yeah.
Yeah.
It's something that is not pure awareness, because just the sense of unnaturalness means there's something there. You're experiencing something.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, that's not pure awareness, because in pure awareness, it's simply awareness being aware of awareness. So every experience we have in life has this three-part structure to it of the experiencer, the object of experience, and the process of experiencing. But when we're experiencing pure awareness, we have this one unique kind of experience that's only this one, and that is awareness is being aware of awareness. So instead of three things, we only have one thing. Awareness is being aware of itself. You may want to go ahead and resolve that. What I'm going to do is have the other people, because you've already worked on this, and have the other people work on the resolution of the fear of punishment. which is also, interestingly enough, the fear of confrontation. It's really cool when you really get this one and you're no longer afraid of being punished or threatened by some kind of confrontation. It's wonderful because the person is attempting to coerce you and you just don't have to respond to it because you don't feel threatened. If you have any residual energy of the fear of punishment coming from traumas still being in you that are related to experiences of having done something innocently as a little kid and then not knowing that it was, quote, wrong, but getting punished for it. Anything like that that you're aware of?
Yeah, I'm actually feeling overwhelmed just from listening to this whole thing because there are so many things being triggered for me. But I grew up in a lot of chaos, mental illness, and movement, and so not much made sense to me as a child. And you're just trying to walk through life and be your little self,
Yeah.
and running into chaos. Or so there was a lot of fear, I guess, of overt punishment, but of doing the wrong thing, or just by you don't know what you're doing, and you're surrounded by chaos. So there's just a general tension.
Okay, that's great. Well, let's go through the process of resolving it. And this will be not only for you, but for those who watch the video. When you think about that situation, you can sense this sort of chaos feeling inside. And this chaos feeling, we're going to test and see, this is an in-technique energy. Yeah, it's kind of like a subtle trauma, right? It's not like dramatically traumatic, but it's enough to make you feel uncomfortable.
Or anxious.
Yeah, or anxious. And this ongoing anxious feeling or discomfort is not something you need in your life, definitely. And it would also have a tendency to interfere with the fullest possible expression of you being able to sense and trust and act on your intuition. So we definitely want to clear this up. If you close your eyes and you think about this topic, is there any specific localized place where you can sense this discomfort with the whole topic of trusting your intuition and being true to yourself?
Yeah, I can feel it from the throat. It's all on the right side, and it's the throat down to the solar plexus.
Okay, so got a little column of energy there. In that column from the throat down to the solar plexus, if you allow yourself to get a little closer to it and feel it, is there an area within that sort of column where the energy feels more concentrated or more intense than elsewhere?
Yeah, in the throat area.
Okay, so let's go there, and you'll notice that there's a even more localized pattern of energy being held in that area in the throat. And what we want to do is do the in technique on it, which, as you well know, is just to allow yourself to notice that central, strongest part of the energy. As you do that, the energy will feel stronger than normal. And that's not because you're making it stronger. It's because it already is stronger, but you've been avoiding going there, avoiding feeling it. You don't want to experience that old nasty stuff from childhood that made you feel so uncomfortable back then. So have a long-term habit of just sort of getting as far away from it as you can get. But when you consciously decide that you're going to allow yourself to feel it, when you feel the whole energy that's really there. And so then it feels as if it's stronger than normal.
Right.
And so as you feel it, initially it feels stronger than normal, but very gradually it will start to lessen, become softer. And when it does, just give a little nod so I know that's happening. Okay, good. When it gets softer, this allows us to be able to get closer to whatever's left. You just click in closer like you're on Google Maps and you're getting a magnified view. You just get closer to whatever's left. And again, you focus your attention right into the center of the strongest part of the energy field. This will make it feel a little stronger again. And again, it's not because it is stronger, it's just because you're simply closer to it. And it fades away some more, it gets a little softer. So we get closer to it yet again and again, that makes it feel a little stronger again. So there's a cycle here. The energy fades away because you're in the process of completing something you couldn't complete at the time. And so as it starts to get completed, there's less intensity. So then you click in closer for a magnified view. You focus your attention back into the central, strongest part of the energy field. And again, you start to feel down into it, and it gets a little softer as you go. You're smiling, must be getting really softer. At a certain point, the experience changes and the energy starts to kind of dissipate or sort of vaporize or dissolve and sort of fades away. Sometimes people describe it, as I've mentioned before, it's kind of like the fog burning off in the morning sun. And so when it burns off completely and it's gone, then you find yourself in that same quiet, silent, empty background that you experience when you do the quietness technique. This is just the pure awareness in which this old in-technique energy has been hanging out. It's just been holding on in there, being a kind of barrier or preventing you from experiencing the pure awareness as richly and fully as you'd like to. So when the energy is all completely gone, then you can open your eyes.
Okay.
There you go. Very good. So now we do a little bit of a kind of provocation test. And the way we can do that is you think back to when you were a kid and you were about to do something. And because there'd been such chaos in your household, you decided not to do it because it was just going to create more discomfort. You got good at doing that. So good that it became kind of just an unconscious pattern in your life that you've not been as fully aware of as you might be. So now as you think about that kind of situation, see if you still feel the discomfort that you had before in any way.
No. There's a little residue on the outer edge, but generally the thing in the right side of my body extending down my spine is definitely gone.
Okay,
But
great.
when I was working on this, I was doing the in technique, and for a second it turned into the out technique, meaning I kept on looking closer and closer and closer, but I was also aware that this was outside of myself, if that makes any sense.
Well, it makes a lot of sense based on what you just said a few moments ago, which is it still feels like there's something kind of peripheral, like there's something there. So this, I was just going to say before you said all what you just said, that this is very likely that there's still some residue, we call it, of the out technique energy is still there. Let's just check. Yeah, there's still some of that there. So let's now do the out technique on the whatever is left of that sort of peripheral outside energy. Now technique we learned in lesson 3, and you just go notice that there's a cloud of energy there. In this case, the part of it that you're feeling is kind of the outer reaches of it, but you allow yourself to notice that and notice that that energy actually occupies some area of space outside of you. There's still something there, or you wouldn't be feeling it. Yeah. So go find the outer edge and the surrounding quietness that's outside of the edge. Cool thing about the out technique is that when you get outside the energy field into the background of silence, that emptiness in which out technique cloud of energy is occurring, when you get into the silence, there's a kind of lovely feeling of extracting yourself from something. You feel sort of liberated. It's kind of like taking dark glasses off and all of a sudden starting to see things for what they really are. And then when you go deep into the quietness and you notice how vast and limitless it is, which is a step that's very important to do every time you do the out technique, and you can allow yourself to simply feel it, that vast limitlessness. Now, this is an experience of your awareness being aware of awareness. So it just has this kind of expansive, peaceful, limitless vastness to it. And after enjoying that for a bit, you can look back at the residue of the energy cloud that you were inside of just moments ago and see if there's any of it left or if it's shrinking or fading away. Just check out the status of it.
Yeah, definitely faded away interiorly.
Okay. Okay, very good. Anything left of it at all?
Yeah, I'm in outside. There's stuff left, but I feel that the vastness and the loveliness of pure awareness in relationship to that cloud or whatever you want to call it is so ridiculous. It's almost laughable. So there's a lot of joy in my heart.
Wonderful, wonderful. So there's a way for us to finish off the whatever's left of that cloud, and that is by using those few questions in the Our Technique script or process. So we first check to see is there's been a story running in your consciousness that has caused this Our Technique energy to be there. And it's a kind of story of almost a kind of resignation to life having this kind of chaotic discomfort sort of feeling about it, because it was there so predominantly in your early life. And so there's a story that's sort of like an inevitability. It's like that's just there. And what we want to do is to recognize that running that story is simply a bad habit left over from childhood. And so we want to just challenge whether there's any benefit to keeping that story in place. Like maybe you develop this discomfort as a kind of attempt to compensate or have some, some other aspect of the experience. But if you think about it, is agreeing with this inadvertent habitual story, is that getting rid of the reaction?
No.
No. And is it benefiting your life in any aspect by continuing to allow that story to be present?
Well, it's working. It's working in my interactions. It's like there's chaos outside, so you have to provide the ballast for order, and it gives you a purpose. It gives you a reason to be if you're surrounded by chaos, So does that need to be continued? No. Is that necessary for anything necessarily? No.
There you go. So the familiarity of it is something that is easy to have a kind of identification with, like, oh, I've been using this for all my life, and that's, significant, and it's kind of been helpful in a certain respect. But your last question is it really helping? Is it really useful? And the answer is definitely no. Good. That's really good. Mm-hmm. So that means the last of those three questions was, is it good to keep this going? Is that a good use of your life energy?
No.
And that's a big no. And this sets the stage for so you've just made something that's been a long-term unconscious pattern, interestingly enough, you've just made it conscious. You didn't realize you were doing this. Hmm? Yeah, it was that self-sabotage.
No, it just seems normal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so when you have this recognition that normal was actually not so purely normal,
or necessary.
Not necessary, exactly. And maybe it had its advantage for some period of time, but is it continuing to be of value? And the answer is no. So when you ask the next question is like, is it possible to simply let go of the story and not have it running in your consciousness anymore? And then you decide to actually go ahead and try that out and just let the story go if it's not actually necessary to have it anymore. And when you do that, then the story and the residual energy just tend to collapse back into nothing. And then you feel really free of it, lighter. Yeah, wonderful. Great job.
Thank you.
Who knows what we have lurking down in there? Yeah, it's one of the great things about this work is it allows us to make things that have been unconscious conscious. And in that process, then the need to continue to perpetuate them just sort of vanishes. And it does become kind of ridiculous. Very good. Wonderful. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. How are you doing, Giles?
So the gatekeeper has been resolved. When you talked about awareness, it sort of went away immediately.
Okay.
Now there are a lot of in-technique energies coming up. A
Okay.
lot of backup copies, I think, in my head. So
Working on
I'm
those.
still working on it, yeah.
Okay, good. Very good. So the next thing we want to do is to get rid of the fear of uncertainty. And this habit of creating expectations in an attempt to have certainty is a kind of way of shooting ourselves in the foot, because when we create an expectation, we're actually setting ourselves up for some kind of disappointment or some kind of upset. And that's because we're making something up in our mind, and the only place it exists is in our mind, not in reality. And this is quite distinct and separate from an intuition. An intuition is perceiving something that's coming. I refer to it often as remembering the future. Now, the quantum physicists say that the mathematics of the past and future are identical. And then they say, well, how come we can only remember the past? But I think their mathematics is good, but their knowledge of conditioning is a little bit lacking, because people project things into the future, either positive or negative, all of the time. When we have the experience of uncertainty, and in the uncertainty, we get some painful experience, it's quite understandable that we could create a habit of fearing that something like that can happen again. And when we're afraid that something negative could happen again, the most common attempt to compensate for that is to create an expectation. The expectation is hoping that things will happen the way you want them to be, not just any way, but my way. But as I said at the very beginning of this class, the universe tends to be non-coercible. And so when we have traumas at the basis of fearing uncertainty, the way to solve this problem is to resolve those traumas. So this class is going a little bit longer than some of the others, but that's okay. I was actually anticipating that. So I hope all of you who are here can stay with me. And what I'd like to do is to identify the traumas at the basis of the fear of uncertainty and get them resolved, because these are definitely clear obstacles to being able to trust your intuition, your inner knowing. For people in the class and those who will be watching, there are two principal traumas regarding the fear of uncertainty. And so these are both in-technique energies, yes. And so we're going to resolve both of these. It may not take very long, and we'll see. So what I'd like you to do is go into the quietness and use the locate technique to tell your body to show you. You may have one or you may have two. Either the people here or the people watching, that may be the case. And so go into the quietness and tell your body, show me the energy of the priority energy, in-technique energy of the trauma that's causing the fear of uncertainty and causing the habit of creating expectations. So go ahead and do that now. And just for those of you who are new to this, the reminder is when you use locate, you tell the body to show you the specific pattern of energy you're looking for. And when it does, then you shift to the in technique, which involves noticing that there's field of energy where the body is showing you there's some sensation. And that's the energy of the unresolved trauma. In this case, the trauma is associated with just living in uncertainty and having unexpected things come out of the blue and sort of clobber you, and then fearing that that could happen again. So you go ahead and notice the central strongest part of the energy field, and just allow yourself to simply notice it. And what will happen is it'll gradually soften and become less. When it does, immediately get closer to it. That'll make it feel a little stronger. That's okay. Just again, feel right into the center of the strongest part of the sensation, and it will gradually soften and become less. And keep doing that until the energy is gone. And when the energy of the first hand technique is completed, then you can shift right away to telling the body to show you, you'll already be in pure awareness, and tell the body to show you the second one, if there is a second one. And if there's no second one, then you're done. But if there is a second one, the body will show it to you, and you can shift to doing the in technique on this second energy. And whether you have one or two in technique energies, when you're finished with whatever's there, then you can enjoy the quietness a little bit, and then when you're comfortable, open your eyes. Okay, so Carolyn, you got them. I'm just double checking. Yeah, you did. Good job. Right. Okay. And so this is great. We have one more, just to talk a little bit more about that. When we're resolved about no longer fearing uncertainty, it creates an opportunity for a very interesting shift in your experience from living ongoing in a kind of discomfort or even terror of uncertainty. What happens is you can shift into a state of wonder and delight of uncertainty. So instead of saying what terrible thing is going to happen, there's a different feeling. It's like, oh, what cool thing is going to happen next? And this is a great shift to have happen. So the third category of traumatic energies that can get in the way of trusting and acting on your intuition is the fear of emotional overwhelm. And that fear comes from having been emotionally overwhelmed many, many times as a kid, particularly as a kid, but ongoingly in one's life. And when the energy of the emotional overwhelm is strong, there's a tendency to want to get as far away from it as possible. And so we have a tendency to not complete the experiences of things that are emotionally painful. What do? We store them inside. And most people have a pretty good collection of them. And what we're interested in is specifically the ones that create the feeling of wanting to resist feeling things, of wanting to not have to experience being emotionally overwhelmed. And so this is a kind of subset of the in technique energies that's there. It's not all of them. Okay? It's the ones that are specific to this particular issue that interfere with being able to trust and act on your intuition. So in our case, the people in the class and the people watching the video have some of these. There's just one that's central to the issue of fearing being emotionally overwhelmed. And that's probably one that's kind of a collection of the times that happened, such that it's all sort of been coalesced into kind of one conglomerate energy, and we can resolve that with the in technique. Yes. Okay. Oh, Jaz, you're with us now. Good. So you can work on this too. This is good. So the in technique energy is the energy of the trauma from being emotionally overwhelmed, and it's the specific trauma that causes the fear of being emotionally overwhelmed. So when you use locate to find it, tell the body, show me that in technique energy that is the cause of fearing that I could be emotionally overwhelmed, and doing my best to avoid that. So go ahead and do that. There's just one energy. This will generally also be true for most people. Most people will have kind of put all these experiences into one file folder, so to speak. So we're kind of putting the entire file folder in the trash. So when the body shows you that constricted place inside where you've been accumulating these stresses, then just notice the central strongest part of it. It may be a bit uncomfortable, but notice that it's still possible to allow yourself to experience it. And as is frequently the case, this may make it seem stronger than normal, not because it is stronger, but just because we're really allowing ourselves to feel the whole thing. And that's okay. It'll gradually soften. And each time it softens, get a little closer to it, as we've been doing. You'll be starting to kind of get the hang of doing the in technique here. This is good. The basic concept of the in technique is that you allow yourself to feel the sensation of the in technique energy so thoroughly, so completely, that there's nothing left to feel. So when you reach that state where the energy's gone, there's just the quietness of pure awareness present, no more energy, no sensation of discomfort. When you reach that state, you can just enjoy it for a little bit, and then when it feels appropriate, you can open your eyes.
So I feel pretty clearly where the energy is. It's here. But I have the sense that something is blocking me from completely feeling it, but I don't know what.
So you can use the locate technique again to tell it to show you the energy of that which is blocking you from being able to feel the central energy we're looking for.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great thing to recognize that you can use the locate to find pretty much any energy that's in the way of anything. And when you do and you resolve that energy, then you'll find that this is actually what we call a second category gatekeeper. It's just an in technique energy that's just sort of in the way, creating kind of resistance to change. You may notice when you complete an in technique energy sometimes and it's really gone, that you may have some physiological response to that. It's very common for people to like sigh or yawn or have some kind of experience like that, which can be an expression of the body really releasing the last part of the energy, and then there's a kind of sense of relief from that.
Tom,
Yeah, Susanna.
I noticed that when I get that sigh of relief, like the big energy that I was in did clear, and then I scan around for anything left.
Sure.
There's like little bits around the edges.
Sure.
Is that something that's accurate, or am I just?
Oh yeah, no, that's actually fairly common. That's a good observation. Yeah. So then you get rid of the boulders, and then you get rid of the pebbles that were around it. Okay, Carolyn's done. It's good. How you doing, Giles?
Yeah, so I resolved the gatekeeper and then also the original energy, and I'm now working through a few backup copies.
Okay.
This is maybe the 5th or something.
Oh wow. Good work. Picking them up and putting them down. This is good. Great. So removing this fear of being emotionally overwhelmed is a wonderful thing to do, to get that out of your life. And it makes it possible to be even more present to things that you experience. You just don't have the fear that they're going to overwhelm you. Even if they're intense, even if they do overwhelm you, it's kind of like you just, okay, reboot, start over, big deal. It's like the whole fear associated with being overwhelmed, when it's gone, it's a really kind of liberating feeling. So this is good work. So we'll let you go ahead and continue, Joaz. I'm just going to say a few words about the list that you made earlier of a few things that you want to have be better in your life. Bring that with you to tomorrow's class or the next class. It'll be different timing for different people, but we're going to do the recording of it in our tomorrow, again at 10 o'clock, and bring it with you, because what we're going to be doing tomorrow is practicing the freedom practice, because you now have all the basics. You have the quietness technique, you have the locate technique for finding the energy when it's too well suppressed and hidden, and you have both the in and out technique energies, which are the two main energy resolving processes we have. And you also have muscle testing. And now, from what we've done today, the muscle testing will be easier, lighter, more present in your life, and you'll be able to incorporate it more and more, and it'll just become a natural part of what you use as a tool in your life. I learned it about 25 years ago, more than 25 years ago, and I consider it to be one of the most valuable things I've ever learned. So I use it all the time, every day, lots of times, and you'll find that it's wonderful to have that as a skill and a process that you integrate into your life. So that's great. So it'll get better and better as you use it. You'll find that you'll start to have experiences like you'll be walking down the street and you'll walk past somebody, and the whole sense of them and what they've just done, even their whole life, is just like you'll just sense it, you'll know it. And this is an expression of an expanded capacity to experientially know things that's a natural consequence of doing lots and lots and lots of muscle testing. So you'll find that at first I'll be like, whoa, that's amazing. Yeah? And then as you get used to it, you can actually turn it on or off as you like. So you can pass through it and sense that it's there, but not get all sort of, distracted by it. So you have many wonderful new experiences of learning to trust and follow your intuition that'll be coming up. It's going to make an enormous difference in your life. So in our next lesson, we're going to practice the freedom practice. What we'll do is we'll do a freedom practice for, say, 20 minutes or so, and then we'll do a debrief. And we may do it, that cycle of doing the freedom practice and then the debrief, we may do it more than once so that we can get some beginning to get the sense of how this is going to be being used on an ongoing basis. We'll also have an opportunity to take any kind of questions about the actual use of it and the process of it starting to integrate into your daily life, where you'll start to be more conscious of the ego and emotionally pain-based thoughts, be able to muscle test for them as they come up during the day, and then be able to shift to immediately using the pure awareness techniques to resolve them. So that'll be our lesson for tomorrow. We may or may not need a PowerPoint for that. We'll see. I'll be checking that today. And thank you very much for joining the class today. I think we'll close, and Joaz knows how to continue and work on his own on those yep, he's good. So thank you again very much for attending. Thank you, Susanna, also, even though we didn't have your video, that's totally fine. And look, oh, there you are. Hi. Wow. Oh, you look great.
Thank you.
Were you just at the hair cutter or spa or something?
Physical therapy.
Physical therapy. That's right. You mentioned in the beginning.
I've been decades.
Okay. Hope it's helping. You may find, I had to share this with you because it may be of help. I had a woman who was a long-term student of mine from Korea, and she came to the States several times to attend seminars and trainings that I gave. And I actually went to Korea to be a speaker at a conference on spirituality and coaching. I was the keynote speaker, and she was one of the people who translated for me for the Korean audience. In fact, I had this lovely experience. There was a group of Buddhist monks in that group. And at the end, after the presentation, the senior one, who was obviously the leader of this group, he came down on stage and he came up to me and he took it's almost overwhelming to remember. He took my hand in his hands and he said, "Mr. Stone, you are very good." It was really kind of a delightful experience. Made my day. In any case, what I was going to say is that this woman who was doing the translation, she had a surgery on her abdomen, a big incision on her abdomen. And it turned out it was hurting ongoing for about 2 years. Well, normally things, heal up and they don't continue to hurt for so long, but this was happening. So I gave her a session using the In technique to resolve the energy that was the cause of the pain. And at the end of the session, the energy was like gone. And I had a follow-up with her a couple weeks later, and it turned out it had come back, but it had come back only at about 10% of what it was originally. And so we did the In technique again, and then it was gone, and then it stayed gone. So I'm saying this because we have a tendency to think of the things that we work on with this work as being emotional. But here's something that's just a physical, cutting open of the body, and the healing process was not completing itself properly. And by doing the In technique, it just tremendously helped her get out of this 2 years worth of the chronic pain. So I thought I'd just mention that because your situation, you may be able to take advantage of this in ways that people wouldn't normally think to take advantage of it. And I have the feeling you're already doing that, but I just thought I'd mention it also for people who would be watching the video. So again, thank you all so much for being here. Appreciate it. We'll see you in the next class, and that'll wrap up the learning of the Freedom Practice. Thank you so much. Take care. Have a lovely...
Thanks for the class. Thanks very much.
You're very welcome. Have a lovely weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.